Now, before you continue with this video, I have to give you a warning, as we will be diving into the terrible ownership of a man by the name of SpongeBob SquarePants. In this video, we'll be discussing serious topics such as animal abuse, cruelty, neglect, and so much more. So just know, you have been warned. But before I continue, I want to catch you up just a little bit on how this whole video came to be. It started with me asking myself, who's the saddest character in SpongeBob? Obviously, the first guy we think of is Squidward. I mean, the man is the living embodiment of depression. He hates his job, hates his neighbors, nobody recognizes his talents, and he simply just lives a very mundane lifestyle. And I kind of easily could have chopped it up there to Squidward being the saddest character in SpongeBob, but that's too generic. So I wondered who else could possibly even come close to this level of sadness. Then I realized the only character actually rivaling Squidward in elite levels of depression is Plankton. His life is terrible. The man has an unsuccessful business. His wife is a computer program. And overall, he gives the vibe of a bitter, old, lonely man. So technically, my question of who's the saddest should come down to Squidward or Plankton. But it isn't that simple. See, although both of these men aren't living the best lifestyle, they are far from being forced to live in a terrible situation. That crown would go to Gary the Snail. Now, I can already see people disagreeing with me, but stick with me for a second. See, the reason I say that Gary is in the worst situation possible is because Squidward and Plankton somewhat chose their lifestyles. And although it's easier said than done, they have the ability to change their situations in life. Plankton doesn't have to make his life mission to steal the secret formula. And Squidward does not have to live and put up with the shenanigans of Patrick and SpongeBob. But on the other hand, Gary doesn't have much of a choice, and he is in the worst situation possible throughout the entire series. See, according to my calculations, there are 21 episodes where Gary is a prominent character in the show, and I counted 7 episodes where Gary is treated terribly. This means that anytime Gary is a prominent character on screen, there is a 33.3% chance he gets hoed. And I'll be breaking down each and every bit of this 33% to really understand the tragic lifestyle of Gary the Snail. Starting with probably the most iconic episode here. Have you seen this snail? See, the episode starts with SpongeBob actually being a decent pet owner and getting Gary some food. But unfortunately for Gary, this all goes out the window when SpongeBob gets his special package. The official Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy paddleball set. And he is excited. And I'm excited for him. Who wouldn't be happy to get this? He even has a chance to defeat the Dirty Bubble Challenge. But after a long time of playing with himself, he eventually forgets to actually feed Gary. And even though Gary is trying to tell him, hey man, I need to eat food or I'm gonna die, SpongeBob could care less. So eventually Gary finally just ups and leaves, because if he sticks around, he's simply just gonna starve to death. And it takes SpongeBob an entire 10 days to even notice that Gary is gone. And while all this is going on, Gary's going through it, man. Hasn't had food or shelter in days. He don't know what to do, until thankfully this nice old lady took him off the streets. And in a matter of hours, Gary is living his best life. Heated blankets, a nice warm home. Are those freshly baked cookies? This man is living the life of a king. And while Gary is living his best life, SpongeBob is in shambles, man, leading us to one of the saddest songs of our lifetime.
Gary, now I know I was wrong. I messed up and now you're gone.
But thankfully, SpongeBob's hard efforts worked out, because some of the flyers he gave out went to this old lady that had Gary. Gary saw this and probably figured it was time to go home, especially after he found out this woman was a freak. This whole time she was buttering Gary up, trying to stuff him so she can eventually eat him and take his shell. And eventually, as a happy ending, Gary and SpongeBob reunite. And I know this is supposed to be like a happy ending, but realistically, how many years would SpongeBob go to prison for this? And obviously, to find this out, we'd have to actually find out what crimes he committed. And considering the fact that he practically left his snail with no food for days, it's sounding a bit like animal cruelty. But the punishment for animal cruelty is vastly different across multiple states. So, to be as fair as possible, we needed to find the location closest to the Bikini Bottom. And when we do some research and find out what Bikini Bottom is based off of, we find out it's based from Bikini Atoll, which is in the Pacific Ocean. And when we consider the fact that California is right next to the Pacific Ocean, and also that SpongeBob is literally produced in Burbank, California, it would make sense for us to make sure we're going by California laws. And according to an LA criminal defense attorney, animal cruelty can be labeled as willful abandonment, locking up an animal without proper food or water, and most importantly, evidence that an animal is thin or dehydrated due to a lack of food, water, shelter, and protection from the weather, which is obviously what SpongeBob commits in this episode. And in the state of California, animal neglect is a misdemeanor and is punishable by up to 6 months in county jail or a fine of $1,000. The reason we know SpongeBob does not have $1,000 to pay is because he works for Mr. Krabs, meaning he is poor. But even after this, I still do have some type of hope for SpongeBob. He didn't really mean to wrong Gary at all. You could easily chop it up to the fact that he simply forgot. And I even have higher hopes because at the end of the episode, SpongeBob says this.
Okay, good. I promise, Gary, things are gonna be different between you and I.
Things are gonna be different between you and I. Things are gonna be different between you and I.
Now, when we first hear SpongeBob say this, we think he's going to take accountability. But if we take a moment to look at the slight arch in eyebrows, the frown on his face, it was the biggest indicator that things would only get worse. Which brings us to the episode Grooming Gary, where SpongeBob wants to take Gary and win first place at the Bikini Bottom pet show, which operates very similar to real life pet shows. And if you know anything about pet shows, they can be very disturbing. We even see this at the beginning of the episode where Gary is actively hiding from SpongeBob because he does not want to do this competition with him. And we understand exactly why he wouldn't want to do this. In the next scene, we see all these different pet owners trying to show off these animals as if they're some type of trophy. And SpongeBob seeing this, he naturally starts to compare Gary. The fancy snail has a very nice shell, very nice teeth. Everything about the man is fancy. Then we look at Gary, he's a bum. But SpongeBob tries to give him some type of makeover. And now he just looks like some TikTok e-boy. And we also see how all the other pets are not liking this one bit. And we can kind of see how these pet owners are projecting their insecurities onto these animals. And I think this episode kind of perfectly portrays the weird world of pet shows in the first place. Because in real life, there are documented times where these animals have gone through stress and anxiety. And these animals being treated as commodities or trophies. There are even times where owners will straight up abuse their pets to make sure that they're learning the right tricks or wearing the right things. And overall, this SpongeBob episode kind of perfectly encapsulates that. And eventually, Gary is sick of it, starting an uprising amongst the animals, from which they start fighting back against their terrible owners. And it's only till the end of the episode where SpongeBob understands that he's in the wrong. And once again, SpongeBob says this. And he's right. This wouldn't happen again. But it would get much worse. See, so far we've reviewed times where SpongeBob has shown neglect and overall bad behavior, but we have yet to see a time where SpongeBob put Gary in actual direct danger, until the episode A Pal for Gary. Often considered one of the worst episodes of SpongeBob history. I mean, just look at some of these reviews. When A Pal for Gary comes on TV, I turn it off. This episode is terrible. A Pal for Gary is the worst thing ever. Waste of your time. Even on the IMDb website, it is a 3.2 stars out of 10. But let's really analyze this episode to see if it's really that bad. In the episode, SpongeBob feels bad for leaving Gary at home by himself while he goes to work all day. But Gary, on the other hand, is living his best life, not caring if SpongeBob is gone all day. Regardless, SpongeBob thinks of the idea to have another pet so Gary is not that lonely while he's at work. And even though the lady straight up warns SpongeBob that these pets are dangerous, especially around other animals, he doesn't care. Now, at first appearance, you'd think Fluffy isn't a bad guy at all, but in reality, he's a straight up demon. And obviously, Gary ain't feeling him. But SpongeBob continues to force him to hang out with Fluffy because he doesn't see anything wrong. Mind you, the entire reason SpongeBob got Fluffy in the first place was because he thought Gary was lonely. And if Gary was so lonely, why would he be so scared of this demonic entity? Regardless, SpongeBob can care less. And the fact that Gary is constantly trying to warn SpongeBob just for SpongeBob to shrug him off shows just how careless he is. And fast forward a couple hours later, Gary's about to die because of SpongeBob's stupid mistake. And throughout the entire night, Gary is literally fighting for his life. And the moment SpongeBob sees what's happening, he still is too stupid to understand that Gary is about to die. But then Fluffy turns his attention to SpongeBob, and when SpongeBob is about to die, he's still yelling at Gary. And even when Gary saves SpongeBob, he proceeds to still ridicule him. And to make it even worse, he brought him into work for Mr. Krabs for pennies on the hour. And I'm sure now you can see why this is one of the worst rated episodes in the entire series. This goes beyond SpongeBob just being stupid. He is blatantly just being a terrible owner, bringing in a threat to himself and Gary due to his lack of competence, just for Gary to save the day and still ends up getting holed, bro. Now I can see this being another act of animal endangerment, but some people will see this as violating the California Penal Code 597, which makes it a crime to intentionally maim, mutilate, torture, wound, or kill a living animal. And although he didn't intentionally do it, I wouldn't be surprised if the court of law ruled it as animal cruelty and gave this man 3 years in state prison. This man is a danger to himself and Gary. And I continually just feel bad for Gary because he continuously gets holed, even if it's not with SpongeBob. Like in the episode I Was a Teenage Gary, where Squidward is supposed to take care of Gary, but it just doesn't happen for some reason. And even in the episode Pet Sitter Pet, where for whatever reason SpongeBob trusts Patrick to take care of Gary, and Patrick almost forgot to feed Gary, but he was about to do it until he ended up feeding himself. And at this moment I felt nothing but absolute pain for Gary, bro. Then later in the episode, when he ran a bath for Gary, he pulled out the food like he was gonna feed him just to put it in the bath. He basically just taunting him at this point. This has to be some form of torture. And I talked about this in one of my previous videos about how Patrick can be so stupid sometimes that it pisses you off. But I think the worst moment where SpongeBob lets somebody take care of Gary is with Mr. Krabs in the episode The Scent of Money, where the money-hungry Mr. Krabs notices that Gary has a special ability to attract coins to his shell. So he pretty much takes Gary around town stealing coins from anywhere he can find. But the problem with this is that Gary gets very worn out from this, and Mr. Krabs can care less. And when Gary doesn't want to do it anymore, there are times where he straight up threatens him. And even when Gary is trying to warn SpongeBob about this crazy man, SpongeBob didn't pick up on a single thing. We eventually just see how worn out Gary is from Mr. Krabs. But once again, Mr. Krabs takes it too far and continues to abuse Gary. Eventually, SpongeBob does confront Mr. Krabs, but at this point, it's gone on for way too long, bro. And it's honestly kind of sad just how many times SpongeBob leaves Gary with people that are just incompetent. And obviously, I still think that a good amount of the blame should go on SpongeBob in these situations, but there's a few people out there that defend SpongeBob's actions through him simply being an idiot and leaving him with people that could care less about taking care of Gary. Like in the episode Have You Seen the Snail, I've seen people actually try to defend SpongeBob and point the blame at Gary, saying that he's in the wrong for not waiting for SpongeBob to just feed him. Apparently, he instead threw a tantrum and basically replaced SpongeBob as an owner. And to that I say, do you blame the man? If your owner is so mentally deficient that he gets distracted with a toy and doesn't feed you, that's an issue, man. Or even in the sense of money, where a lot of people do point the blame at Mr. Krabs, which deservingly so. The man was straight up abusing Gary at one point. But if Gary's constantly trying to hit towards you that something is wrong and you cannot pick up on that, which is a common theme for SpongeBob to do, maybe he needs to understand that this life of being a pet owner isn't for him. But clearly SpongeBob doesn't notice this, and eventually goes from possibly excusable decisions to outright abuse. I'm sure a lot of us know about the episode The Great Snail Race. In this episode, Squidward gets himself a new snail and wants to enter into the Great Snail Race. While he's telling SpongeBob about it, he pretty much kind of brags about everything that's great about his snail and not great about Gary. And since SpongeBob feels some type of way, he's going to enter Gary in the Great Snail Race as well. I think we can low-key kind of call back to the Grooming Gary episode about how SpongeBob ended up comparing Gary to other pets and ended up taking it way too far, and now we're kind of seeing this with the Great Snail Race, in which he is prepping Gary for the race. He is taking this way too far. I mean, look what he got him doing. Going across tires, doing wall climbs, hitting the punching bag with his eyes. Gary is clearly not built for these moments, and that is shown in the conditions that he's in by the next morning. He looks horrendous. Even the announcer notices how bad of a shape Gary's in. And obviously this is a very smart man. His cup says I heart BB. Bren BB. This probably means he is a subscriber to the channel, and I think you should be too, but that's just me. By the time the race has started, Gary is in shambles, man. And when he tries to push on, we see his eyes start start exploding. He starts spinning around, crashing everywhere. Gary is going through it. And it takes all of this for SpongeBob to finally understand that maybe he's gone too far. And this has been a theme throughout every single episode we've reviewed today. SpongeBob continuously puts Gary through the most, only for him to realize it's way too late to actually try to recover any of the damages he's done to Gary. And at the end of the day, man, SpongeBob does not need to be a pet owner. It's clearly been shown that he is way too irresponsible and straight up immature and stupid. My goodness, how could I forget he's just stupid? I want to get a hashtag save Gary in the comments of the video if you've made it this far. But other than that, man, I appreciate all the support and love you guys have been showing on the videos. And as always, please stay blessed.